Today's episode is going to be very fun. I will introduce my guest in a second, but if you haven't heard this before, welcome to Thought Crimes. On Thought Crimes, we discuss the hardest parts of our behavior to deliver tactics to take control of our behavior and our lives. On this show, we cover burnout, personality, sleep, neuroticism, and more. Today, we've got Alejandro, a good friend of mine. He is an IPEC certified life coach and yoga instructor. He's the reason I became a yoga teacher. And we're going to be talking a little bit about balance, lifestyle, and priorities today. So, Alejandro, how you doing, man?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
Great. Thank you
Thanks
for
for having me.
coming on the show.
Thank you.
You're working on flow into nature. We're going to talk a little bit about that later. But do you want to kind of just give me before the show, we were talking a little bit about this. Do you want to give me the intro to flow into nature? I think the theme is really cool.
Flow into Nature is a business that me and Nicole, my girlfriend, are starting. And what we're doing really is helping others connect deeper into themselves. So it's called Flow into Nature. We are nature, we are human beings. And what we're really doing is providing a service of yoga, providing a service of coaching, and meditations as well. And the idea is to help us reconnect with ourselves. We are so dispersed in social media and bad news and everything that's happening externally that we forget to come back to who we are, come back to not being in technology. I know that this is a recording and you're probably listening to us on, through your iPod and through your iPhone and whatnot. But at the end of the day, the whole point of all of it is to make sure that we are ourselves for ourselves rather than trying to be somebody for somebody else, especially on social media. So that's really what we're trying to do, is just connect back to our authenticity.
Cool. That sounds so cool. I have so many questions. So let me kind of dig into the first one, which is, you are someone that I've observed is very good at connecting with yourself quickly. This is not as much about that, but it's a secondary effect, which is, how much of that do you think is discipline versus sort of like latent in your personality? Like like, did you have to practice that, or is that something that's just like, that's just Alejandro, that's just how you are?
Well, I would definitely say it's a bunch of repetition, right? I used to be very dispersed, especially like growing up. I was that kid clicking a pen all day in school. Like my mind was racing, and even to this day, sometimes it's really hard to just sit down and focus and do one thing at a time. But repetition is the master of skill. The things that we continuously do over and over again, we are continuously going to get better at, right? And I've been studying and learning from the best life coaches in the world, and I read as much as I can, or podcasts or whatnot. And all of that has fed me the tools that I need, that are necessary in order for me to become that person. How fast do I need to snap out of it, get into this, and just focus on this one thing? And when our mind starts to wander, how do I bring it back, right? And so it's been a practice. I mean, this has been a practice coming on. Personally, it's almost been 10 years of just studying this. I became a life coach almost 4 years ago at this point. And I've been doing yoga, which is kind of where this whole process of self-growth or self-awareness really started for me. One is studying all of it. The other part is putting it into practice. And so that discipline of who I am is somebody that I built myself up to be. So yeah, it comes with practice. It comes with repetition. It comes from failing, right? And it's not failing. We're learning. Every time we're learning, we're looking at it. Can I get better at this? And who do I need to be right now?
Yeah, that's great. It's like what we say in class, right? Like, part of the practice is falling down. If you're doing a hard pose, if you're falling down, you're doing it right? That means you're pushing yourself to your boundary, and then you're getting back up. That's the important piece of this. Are you open to talking about like pre-yoga Alejandro versus post-yoga Alejandro? How did you get into yoga? It seems like it had a really big effect on your life.
Yes. So prior to me being a yoga instructor, I had a full-time job at a tech company in the Bay Area. I was starting my first entrepreneurship venture. I was, filming in virtual reality back in 2015. And that drove me to be bedridden for almost 6 months. So after a couple years afterwards, I understood that what was happening is I was overly worked and stressed. I wasn't eating well. I wasn't working out whatsoever. I wasn't feeding my mind good things. It was just a mental chatter of negativity and keep doing more and more and more. And that my body decided to shut down. And so for about 4 to 5 months, I was literally in bed. I set up a projector from my bed, pointed up to my ceiling. I would wake up, I would take muscle relaxers because I was in so much pain, and I would work from bed literally all day. And, if I had to walk to the bathroom, I would pretty much cry my way there because my back would start spasming, and it was just all sorts of that. So growth comes also from a place of pain. And, when you hit certain thresholds and we say, I never want to feel like that again, our identity changes, and it's something that it becomes part of who I now am.
Wow. I didn't realize it was that bad. I don't think you ever told me about the projector pointed at the ceiling just to work. So, okay, that ties into some stuff that is really interesting, which is like priorities. Like your priorities when you were that Alejandro, your identity at that time, your priorities were all about, your startup, your like technology, computers, right? Like this very linear and very popular right now, right? Like I'm living still near San Francisco, and this is all around me every day. And that means that I have to work to counterbalance the constant input of like, what's good? Sitting on your computer every single day, everything to do with artificial intelligence, it's all good, right? All day, all day, all day. It's just like constant information coming in that like this, right? I'm pointing at my computer for those listening at home, is like God, right? How did your priorities shift? Like, what was the feeling inside of you as those priorities shifted? Was it gradual or all at once?
Great. Like, thank you for making me think, because it's been I mean, my life coach makes me think, but this is like going back and reminiscing. So,
Right.
it was it got pretty bad to the point where something needed to change. Right. And I mean, I was bedridden, and I was not performing as I wanted to. So even my mental state was very down, and the priority had to shift. It shifted to, I need to take care of me first, more specifically because I couldn't walk. Right. I wasn't even talking, I'm not talking about work. I'm not talking about like going out and like doing filming and any of that. Like, it was painful to take steps. The thing that most of us do on a daily basis, we kind of take it for granted because we've been doing it for our whole lives. And so when I went to my first yoga class, I walked out feeling better. It still took about another 4 to 5 months of continuous practice to walk pain-free and get rid of the medications that I was on, because, so on and so forth. And so, yes, it became a change in priority, because I knew that if I didn't take care of me, the rest of everything that was happening around me was going to just continue to fall with me.
Wow.
And when I got fired from my job because I wasn't performing, and I was I was more interested in building my company at that point, which kind of was my passion. And so, one thing led to another, and we say this often, and everything happens for a reason. And in yoga, we say you're exactly where you're supposed to be, because life is only going to give you the challenges that are going to help you grow. Right. Wow. And so, do we see a challenge or do we see an opportunity? So it also comes to the perspective of it. But coming back to that balance, right? The balance that I was trying to find was being able to not be in pain and still have a good enough output that I would feel like I was successful, which was really where my mind was driven at by that point, was success. Because
Ouch. The reason I'm wincing is because I've been there where I tied all of the things that I do to my identity so tightly that they when I would do something bad, I must then be bad, right? Like I can't rest unless I've had a day in which I have like done enough and by my measure. So it's like if I'm not hitting 100% every day, then I must be failing every day, which is like when you actually say these things out loud, they sound crazy, right? But when they're inside you, when they're hard to see, um, it's like it feels like it's true. It feels like it's a reality that it's not. And another thing I wanted to comment on is um, this is when I met you, I was going through a really hard time as well. I was in this like dark period of time. Yoga also was one of the core pillars that helped me find my way back to balance, change my priorities, live more in my body. This was after I had made success my number one priority, like success, but it's like we define it so narrowly. so maybe yeah, Alejandro, I'm putting you on the spot here, but what's your new definition of success? What's success look like today?
So that was almost, yeah, almost 9 years ago, coming up on 9, 10 years now. And so obviously a lot has changed. That was kind of in the middle of my 20s, and that's also the phase where it's like you're trying to figure out what you want to do in life. Not everybody figures it out exactly at 18. Most of us don't. And so what really started to change was I started feeling better physically. And as you know, I love everything that is inversions. For those of you who don't do yoga, this is just the postures that you see that are upside down, handstands, and doing crazy stuff. And the more I challenged myself there, the more I was also challenging who I was, right? One of the beautiful things of yoga and these practices is we can only do them in the moment. It's not something you do in the future, in the past. And learning to become really present became my number one focus. And this is, and especially with my relationship now, like Nicole loves to plan 6 months ahead, and she's always 6 months ahead. And I continuously tell her, like, I don't live there. Like, I understand where I want to go. I do my practices of where do I want to be in a year? Where do I want to be in 5 years? Where do I want to be in 10 years? I do journaling around that, but I don't live there. I understand what my goals are, but I have to realize that this time right now that you and me, this conversation we're having, whenever somebody's going to listen to this is the only time you get. You're going to grab this information, but you have to realize that even like the simple fact of taking a breath can only be taken now. And that presence became my new priority, because when I become really present, one, I'm aware of my emotions, which I think is crucial for all of us, because we are always trying to mask and or hide the emotions that we're feeling. I don't want to deal with this, so I'm going to look at social media. I'm feeling lonely, so I'm gonna have a beer, whatever it may be, right? We resort to drugs or alcohol or other stuff. And so the whole point of it was, the more I can take off the mask, the more I can like peel off the layers and just sit with myself, right? I told you that I was that guy that was always fidgeting with the pen in school and everything. What happens if I slow down? What happens if I put myself in positions that are hard, but instead of me not doing them, what happens if I face the fear and become courageous enough and bold enough to actually be, hey, how do I come out on the other side? And so the only place you understand that is present, right now. And so that became my priority over the last 5-6 years. One, teaching yoga. It's, every time I got onto my mat, or before I started teaching, the thing that I would tell myself, which is, and you've probably heard of mantras, but I would say, I'm not here for me, I'm here for my students, right? And that in and of itself kind of also puts me in a place that I'm in a place of service for others, because this is what, fills my heart, right? It's my part of contribution. But I do this because I know that hopefully somebody in the room maybe has gone through a similar pain that I have, and I have the tools and the teachings and the techniques that can help them put them on the other side the same way that I did when I was going through my pain. And so, but that only happens in this moment. And so the more I can help others bring back into a place of presence, understand their emotions, understand what they're going through, and then see themselves on the other side rather than what the struggle is at the moment, that's really what helps me and drive me forward, and especially in coaching and understanding where you are, where you want to be, and what's stopping you. What is the area in the middle that we really need to explore?
Yeah. Wow. That is very, very well said. Has my mind buzzing about balance, both like the idea of like, oh, it's funny because I think a lot of people, myself included, frequently, I think of balancing like I have all these things I'm carrying and I have to balance them. And actually, you can't just throw that all on the ground. Like that's all in your head anyways, right? You're not actually literally, I'm not literally carrying anything. I'm just breathing in this moment, right? The balance can just be, hey, how am I feeling right this exact second? Can I bring balance to this exact moment right now? Right? There's not this actual forwards and backwards, side to side. It doesn't have to be as complicated as we make it. You mentioned coaching. Let's talk a little bit about that. Because we talked a lot about yoga. And again, just in case you forgot the name, it's Flow into Nature is where Alejandro does all of this stuff. We'll add links and we'll plug it at the end a little bit more so that you can go and like find resources on the stuff that we're talking about. But let's talk about coaching. Is what is the core value that you've gotten from coaching, right? Why coaching? So we understand why yoga. So what's the core value from coaching?
Core value from coaching is to me, it's because I went through the story that I just told you. And then afterwards I was trying to understand where I wanted to go. And so I ran the virtual reality company for 3 years with my good friend, John. And when that, we decided we were going to close down the company, we're like, we are burnt out from this. What do I do now? Right. I put so much time, so much effort into it. We had a wonderful time. There was a lot of growth when you build, your first company, if it goes well enough, and successfully enough to build it for 3 years. But after that, you go, okay, what do I do now? And so I remember my dad called me one day and he goes, we're going to a Tony Robbins event. Do you want to go? And I said, absolutely. So this was towards the end of the second year of my business. And I was like, absolutely, I want to go. So he's like, all right, I'll buy you a ticket. Like, we're going. It was me, my couple of my cousins, my dad. And that's the first time I ever got introduced to life coaching. What does a life coaching do? If you've heard the name Tony Robbins, he's one of the best strategy coaches in the world. And what he teaches, and I to this day still think it's unbelievable, is his main two things are, the first one is the art of fulfillment, and the second is the science of achievement. Mm-hmm. Science of achievement, like if you do the same steps somebody else has taken to get to some certain point, success, we can repeat those steps and get to that same place. Mm-hmm. But fulfillment is an art. You can look at a painting and think that is absolute wonder and beauty. And I can look at it and go, I could have chicken scratched that in 5 minutes, right? And so that's the beauty of all of this, because the science of it, if we want to get to where somebody already is, we can follow those same steps. Obviously, sometimes innovation needs to happen, but for the most part, if you want to get to some place, you can just follow the steps somebody else has taken. But fulfillment, and what really brings us fulfillment, is so individual. And that's why, you need to be authentically yourself, and you need to explore yourself, and we're always changing, and we're always doing that. So the core value of all of that is, to me, is what brings you fulfillment in life. What is it that I was really after? And how can I help others also find this, right? And there's a lot of different techniques and a lot of different things we can do to explore this. But that was, to me, is, can I continuously be myself? And what happens if I help others do that as well? And I think the more we continuously be ourselves, if I help you be yourself, somebody listening to this, continue, just grab one tidbit and go, who am I? And who am I at my essence? And why am I here? I think that helps this world. One, and I would say, if you don't believe in, energy, but the energy is the term that I'm going to use, right? The frequency that we're at, the energy that we're at, that helps bring this world more together rather than create more distance, because again, like I said, we're putting on the mask. And masks is something we continuously say in coaching, because it is a personality, is a persona we try to be, but it is not authentically us. And so it's coming back to that, is bringing more fulfillment, which ends up being more happiness, more joy, more passion, more love, just more juiciness out of this beautiful world that we live in. And I hope we can all live in that place more often than trying to live in, this social media, content driven, let's put out something just because it's going to resonate with other people, but it's not who we are at our being.
Oh man, there's two comments I want to make on that. One is the mask, which is, we found from research. So we're coming from this like data science side of like, okay, can we, you and I kind of have the same mission, right? From what you said, I might say it differently, but like we're on the same path, pointed in the same direction of like, we want to help people, we want to make this place better, we want people to get more out of their life, we want, use of the juiciness, enjoy the juiciness of life. I love that. And so one of the things we've discovered is, and there's many assessments. I think they're all have their merits. The one we've built, we're looking at what we call a shape of a person, right? You've talked about this. IPEC has a version of this too. It's similar. And from our perspective, somebody, when they're acting out of shape, that's when they're masking. The shape is essentially you have these latent behavioral tendencies, and when you act according to those tendencies, which is like the main thing I communicate to people is, that's okay. It's totally okay to be who you are. Then people get filled, they get energized, they get excited, they have more motivation, and like then you get this flywheel going. And when they act out of shape, they end up masking, and they run to social media, or whatever it is, right? And I want to be clear, like, these things are not intrinsically bad, right? Like, social media is not bad. That's what we're going to be using to communicate like a positive message to people. But it can be used, it's like any tool, right? Like a shovel is not bad, right? But you could use a shovel to like break your best friend's dresser or something. Not that you would. Weird example. But these are just dumb tools, and how we use them is really the sort of the nuanced thing. So yeah, what do you think about the shape thing, the shape perspective?
I like the perspective, and metaphors are huge, right? Because it really allows us to kind of paint a picture, especially in our mind. And that's what we're trying to do, especially if nobody's actually watching us, right? They're just listening to us, like they don't know what we're doing with our hands and so on and so forth. And so metaphors really help paint a picture so that it helps us connect and, unify things together. When we're not in shape, as a life coach, what I say is you're not working according to your values, right? And so we have the values that we want in our life, and the values that we don't want in our life. So, and values are just another word for like the emotions or the feelings that we actually want. I want to feel this, right? I want to feel success, or I want to feel loved, or all this. And I don't want to feel angry, and I don't want to feel lonely, and I don't want to. So the good emotions and bad emotions. And what we're trying to do is we're looking for that, right? Hopefully the good shape that you're talking about is you're living in your values that you want, and that you're on a daily living by the values that make you feel that certain way. And so I'll go a little deeper into this, but you have the values, right? And we all have a list of values. And the thing is, that list of values is in a certain order. So you can say, right, my list might be, number one value, the thing that I want most is freedom. After freedom, I want success. After success, I want, good relationships. And so if those are your top three, for example, but freedom is the thing you want the most, you're going to do everything to try to meet freedom before you do everything else in the list, right? Before you try to meet your success, you want to make sure you're free. But what happens if those are reversed? And we actually have the decision to put those in order. The thing is, we've been carrying our values our whole life, and we never restructure them. And so we continue to do things. I'm like, why do I do this over and over again? It's because you're meeting your value, and you have certain rules to meet that value. I am free when I sit by the pool and enjoy a pina colada, whatever it may be, right? We all have our rules for our own values. And so but we also have rules for how we meet our negative values. And the thing is, when we get into our negative values, we normally spiral them, right? We go around and around. I go, oh, if, like you were saying, if I don't do 100% of me, I don't feel like I was successful. So what happens after that is, I don't feel successful. Then I feel like, I'm angry at myself, or I'm disappointed at myself. And then, I start judging myself. And then, and then what happens is you carry that on to the next day, and it becomes a vicious cycle. So the big part of this, and going back on not getting out of shape, but staying in shape, is making sure that, one, we know what our values are. What are our rules to meet those values? But if we do end up getting into our negative values, into our bad shape, how fast, how quickly do we jump out of that cycle so that we go back into the actual person that we want to be, our values that we want to be going towards?
So is there usually a gap there? I mean, it's implied, but talk more about that. Is there a gap between what people say they want and what they actually need to do to get there?
So, and again, that's how big is your gap? Because a lot of us are trying to go, I'm here and I want to be, I want to have $2 million more than I currently have. I'm like, you need to understand, you need to make $1 at a time. You need to take one step at a time. We don't just get from the beginning to the finish line in one step. So what the gap that we have, and the thing is, we're always stretching that gap, right? Mm-hmm. As life is not a race. It's a journey that we're on. We're all here for a certain amount of time. And during that time, what happens is we're trying to meet our milestones. We're trying to get to the end of the race. But as soon as you finish the race, there's already another one. And so that's why, it's understanding that gap that's there is always going to be there, because we're always just setting up something else for ourselves. But that's why I believe coming back to where we are is so important, because when we live in the finish line, we're not aware of what steps we need to take. So coming back to we need to set our values, and we need to reevaluate our values regularly. And I don't say change your values every single day. I'm saying change them every 6 months, every year, every 2 years. Do an exercise to become aware of what that is, because that's going to help you become more present in who you need to be to become the person that's going to finish this next race you're on. Right. Yeah. And so when we do that, we come back to who we are, come back to the present moment, become a little bit more aware. And then we tackle, hopefully, and this is the biggest part of coaching, is tackle the big things first. Because normally we try to do little things that don't end up getting us closer to the finish line. So the idea is do the big things first and really get yourself forward in that, right? And then you'll notice that the little things that maybe you had to do, you don't actually even have to do, right? It's kind of like then the 80-20 rule. 80% of what you'll do is going to get you faster there than trying to do all the little things.
Right. Yeah. If you haven't heard the 80-20 rule, I think it's called Pareto's principle, which is 80% of the results come from 20% of the effort, right? That's really interesting. Just to summarize that, sort of like we have like this broad theme forming, right? And again, this is kind of about balance, about priorities. and we went through this thought journey, right, of being present, right, feeling your emotions. And there's this tension between creating a mask for yourself, putting on the mask, distracting yourself, running from your emotions, and being in the present moment. So it's sort of like step one. You have to start with, and you can do it right now. You don't need life coaching or yoga to do the first step. You can just, okay, I'm here, right? Oh, it doesn't feel good in here. Okay, don't grab your phone. Sit with it. That will probably lead to then your real priorities, right? It feels bad inside of there. The things that you've done versus the things that you've said, that may be the hint of the gap, right? What do we call this? I think it's perceived values versus observed values. Or I might have the words wrong on that. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
Okay. It's
So
like,
yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
something someone says they want versus what they do that represents their real priority. So that you're sitting in this presence, you find your priority, and it sounds like from what I'm pulling out of what you said is people then create this list. Maybe they don't even know they have this list. Might be unconscious, but you have it. You have it. Your behavior is telling everyone else in the world, and probably everyone around you knows. Like they might be able to write a lot of your priorities out. Like you like coffee, drink it every day, right? We might not put it on that. I need coffee in the morning, whatever.
Yeah.
And so people have this list, and they might start going, okay, cool. Well, I really want to change my life. I really want to get healthy, and I'm unhealthy. I drink Coke every day. But where I'm going to start is I'm going to start eating more kale every day. I'm a little bit more kale. And so they do these little tiny things that are like teetering towards something. And what you're saying is, well, okay, it's like be present, be real, right? This is I'm pulling themes out. So correct me if I'm wrong here, right? With your priorities, and then go after a big one, right? Go after one that's it upstream. Like how would you describe that, right? How do you go after a big one?
So, and I want to
Yeah,
kind of add
you
on
can
here
retool
because
it.
we're kind of retweaking it. The main thing is becoming present allows us to understand who we are, our identity. If we need to change something, it would happen in this moment, and I can change that, and I can just, there's many different ways, but the ideal way of solidifying a new identity is saying things with such conviction and doing something with your body, because our mind and our brain are connected together, right? Doing some sort of physical movement, and Tony Robbins calls these power stances, and studies have been done through the Stanford and whatnot. Like if you put yourself in, in the Superman pose for 2 minutes, your levels of, like testosterone go up, and, you decrease cortisol and all the beautiful things that our bodies can do. And so one is become present, look at who you are to shape your identity, right? And then take action, take a step forward in the direction that you want to go. Make sure that the goal that you're setting, and like you were saying, going upstream or taking that first step, is attainable. Because some of us go, okay, this is my goal, and I'm trying to, jump for buildings. What happens is we go back into those values that we don't want to go towards. And what we want to do is make sure that we're building enough, momentum and success. Yes. What happens if you're drinking a bunch of Coca-Cola, but now you're going to start eating a lot of kale? Okay, good. Start to balance those out. And we're going to start talking about those balances and priorities now, because once you start to get there, okay, when you start eating kale, does that make you feel good? Like, does that actually increase, more energy in your body? Does it like help carve the cravings of sugar, which is really why you're going for that Coca-Cola, right? And we're starting to create a shift in our identity, a shift in who we are and who we really want to be, and how we can become better versions of ourselves. What we need to really pay attention to as this starts to happen, when stress, our little friend, comes in, right? Well, I'm not going to call stress my friend. Stress can be a friend, but just be careful with the wording. But when stress comes knocking, because this world has taught us to live in some sort of stress, right? Specifically in the Bay Area and, places that it's high output all the time and it's work, 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 that creates this level of stress. So when it comes knocking, what happens is you, instead of reach for the kale, you now reach back for that Coca-Cola. And so we fall off sometimes. It's okay. Fall down, get back up. One of the main things, and I love this, and this is from Jerry Seinfeld, he goes, right, don't miss twice. Like, he would write jokes on a daily basis, and he said, if one day I didn't write a joke, the next day I made sure I wrote a joke. And the whole purpose is just don't miss twice. And if what do we start doing? And we were talking about this in the beginning. It's the repetition, it's the repetition, it's the repetition, and do it over and over and over again, right? The first time you try, let's say, ice skating, maybe you're going to slide, you're going to slip, you're going to fall. You don't understand how skating works, or right? And then you're probably holding onto the railing and asking for a little bit of support, maybe holding somebody's hand. There's, like little toys and stuff little kids use to learn, right? But after you practice, let's call it a year, 3 years, 5 years of skating, you're no longer holding somebody's hand or holding onto some sort of toy or the railing. You're now probably able to skate backwards, and you continuously got better at it because there was a practice and you fell down and you learned, and if I put my edge on this side, then I have to go to the other side to balance myself out. And we learn from that. And what we're continuously always trying to do is, as we take those steps forward, are we learning, making sure that if we fall, we get back up and we continue to go? Most of the obstacles live inside of our head. We all think, or we're not good enough, or we're not loved enough. There's the two main, overarching, what we call gremlins in our program, that bring down our energy, right? And so making sure that that's what we're doing, is creating the repetition, is creating the good habits, and we're continuously putting them in practice over and over and over again. And if you fall and you can't get back up, it's because you're living in the fear of what that fail did. And that fail is something either that you did in the past that you believe is going, because it happened, it's going to happen again. So it's an assumption that we make, or we're thinking, I can never actually get there. So you're just thinking you're not good enough. When you come into the present moment and you become aware of that, because the main thing is finding awareness around it. If you don't know that you're actually scared, you're just doing things because it's a natural pattern and a habit you have. What we want to do is become aware. Oh, what emotion am I actually feeling? Is it actually fear? Is it anger? Is it resentment? Is it, name your emotion in a what we call a catabolic emotion, which is an energy that destroys us, because emotions are not good or bad. They're just emotions that help us build, or emotions that destroy us, right? And so are we living in those emotions that are catabolic, that are not necessarily good for us? Judgment, resentment, anger, fear, or are we living in the energies and the feelings that we want, that are anabolic, that help us build, when we feel moments of joy and happiness, when we feel proud of ourselves, when we feel grace, when we feel grateful, when we feel excited about what's in front of us? All of that helps us change the emotional awareness around it, and it can help me change how I confront and take that next step forward.
Very cool. Do you think more people should go into coaching and get coaches for themselves? I guess that's a should. That's a bit of a begging question. Do you think? Let me rephrase it. Do you think that most people would benefit from coaching?
Yes, and coaching happens in so many ways.
Right.
There's a lot of different types and styles of coaching, and a lot of different methodologies, right? Tony Robbins has his, Brendon Burchard has his, right? I did a program called IPEC. There's a lot of different modalities. Coaching, what it helps us do is just understand where you are, where you want to go, and what are the hurdles that are in the middle that we need to go through. And this is where I love metaphors, because most of us say, oh, I hit a wall. Okay, there's a wall. What can you do with the wall? You can either turn around and walk the other way. You can break through the wall. You can, if the wall is tall enough, maybe you invent an elevator to make you go over it. What happens if you walk around the wall? What happens if you dig a hole and go under it? There's so many things that you can do to that wall, because the wall is just a metaphor in our brain for all of it, right? And so we need to figure out which is the best course of action, hopefully tied with who we really want to be rather than the mask. And I think that's crucial, and that's where the priorities will start to, your priorities will be shaped from that awareness that you get. And so do I believe everybody needs a coach? Absolutely. There are instances where coaching isn't necessarily helpful. So I do want to be clear on that. And I do believe like therapy is fantastic, right? Therapy and coaching are entirely different. Now, I was saying coaching happens in a bunch of different ways. Somebody will get something out of this conversation, and that's coaching. Somebody can go to you can be walking around in a grocery store and somebody smiles at you, and there's a certain energetic connection, and for some reason you get a beautiful thought out of that. That can be coaching as well. Like, it can happen in so many ways that it's not just, oh, I'm going to go have this one-on-one conversation. But when somebody else looks at what you're saying and is able to kind of rephrase it back to you and kind of bring more awareness of why that's happening and why you're doing that, I think is extremely beneficial, right? And even coaches have coaches. So it's not just like, oh, I'm going to go do one coaching session, I'm going to be set for life. No, this is reevaluation, constant iteration, constant awareness of what's happening, why we're doing it, and going for it from that standpoint.
Absolutely. Last question, and then I want to talk a little bit about flow into nature, which is, do you think about the future of coaching? Like, what could coaching be in 10 or 20 years? Just talk about that. What do you imagine it would look like?
It'll be having conversations. Coaching, and the true definition of what is a life coaching session, is a thought-provoking conversation. It is something that hopefully makes you challenge. You can challenge your beliefs, you can challenge your values, you can challenge the rules, you can challenge your identity, you can challenge your fears, right? It's a thought-provoking conversation, which is exactly what you are doing on this podcast, which, that's why I love it. And so coaching will evolve to maintaining this human state of conversation. As much as AI is getting good, AI will never understand the emotion the way that we do, right? And just like everything, you have to find your coach, you have to find your teacher, right? And all of that. And so to me, that conversation it's going to stay the same. I think there's obviously people that are better at understanding, visual cues of body language and inflections of tone of voice, and so on and so on, and like reading in between the lines of what you're saying to say, okay, so what I feel like you're saying, or what I'm trying to understand and become aware of what you're doing, is this because of this reason. There's definitely going to be people that are more attained and more attuned to it. So the coaching conversation, it's just a matter of practice, whereas I don't think it's going to change all that much. I think it's the real human connection, and having somebody that's present with you, that believes in you enough to know that you are worthy to get to where you really want to go, to your goal.
Very cool. Great answer. I've really enjoyed talking to you. How can people find out more about Alejandro Kochernikov? How can they take your yoga classes? How can they, maybe you're available as a life coach? Yeah, talk about how they can get in contact with you.
They can find us, go to flowintonature.com, exactly as it sounds. There'll probably be a link somewhere, and I hope Peter puts it up there.
So wherever you're watching or listening, there's going to be a link in the description. Spotify, YouTube. I think we even post some clips on LinkedIn. There'll be links all over everything. So yeah, you can just go click.
Perfect. So Flow into Nature, you'll find all the tabs. We have videos on YouTube if you want to take our YouTube classes, anything from 5 to 10 minute short exercise bursts to all the way to hour-long classes, which I would highly recommend because you take out of time for your day for yourself, not just let's get this done and we're out of it. So Flow into Nature YouTube classes, and in Flow into Nature, you can also find me and Nicole if you want to reach out to us. We'll do a one-on-one session for if you want to do private lessons, which is just all of our attention is on you. You can also find me there for coaching. The first coaching call is always free if you want to reach out to understand what you want and to get to know us a little bit better and see if it's a good partnership, because a coaching relationship also goes both ways. And then one of the things that I'm really excited on and that I'm working on is a program called Light Up. And the whole point of it is the integration of coaching with yoga blended together. So I'm putting it together. The recruitment of it will slowly come through, and it'll be a self-paced course, and then I want to do it in person as well. So working my way towards that.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for listening, and Alejandro, thank you so much for joining us. This
Thank
was a really
you.
fun combo.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you. Have a wonderful day. One question before we go. What are you grateful for?
Oh, wow. Well, right in this moment, I'm grateful that I met you. What are you grateful for?
I'm grateful. Oh man, I have such a beautiful blue day in front of me that it's just, it's nice to see such a beautiful color blue.
Excellent. And audience listening at home, maybe you should take a moment, take a breath, and think about, what are you grateful for?